looking for something interesting to do, why not try Dungeons and Dragons? It's an excellent way to pass time and see a new world with friends, all from the comfort of your home. You can do that now. Dungeons and Dragons is a lot of things, but the most important thing is that it's whatever you want it to be. Do you want a group of macho men swinging swords around? Sure, yeah. Do you want a deep and compelling collaborative storytelling exercise? Absolutely, yeah. Do you want to just laugh and goof around with friends? Absolutely. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing with the right people, and the really lengthy setup is absolutely worth it, in my opinion. Everything is a lot more distanced nowadays, for lack of a particular phrase. I think D&D is a great way to get the feeling of exploring without actually exploring, and especially since the invention of video chatting makes it possible to play online. I've been playing D&D for roughly 5 years now, and it's helped me with a lot of things, my writing ability notwithstanding. Today I'll be covering 3 main things that you'll need to get started. The third, a lot more lengthy than the first 2. First, you're going to need people to play with. It's the most important part of D&D. You can't play alone. Second, I'll show you the materials and resources you'll need to have access to, as well as where to access them, since I imagine most people are going to be doing this online, if they give it a shot. Finally, I'll be walking you through the kind of lengthy process of making an actual character. But the hardest part, and that's the one that we're going to get to first, is gathering the group. You can't play D&D alone at all. It just doesn't work. I've tried, and it's basically writing. First and foremost, you're going to need a dungeon master, or the DM for short. They're the person that runs the game, meaning they create the world, the characters that aren't player characters, and the enemies that players interact with. And all of this is coming out of here, the official Dungeon Master's Guide, published by Wizards of the Coast. DMing can be very stressful for a first-timer, so it's best to find someone a little bit more experienced with 5e rules. Generally, they're supposed to present the world in such a way that players don't feel forced into doing things, which can create a lot of conflict, because different people want different things. So it's best to find someone that fits in with what you want to do, like what type of adventure you want to have, if at all. It can also be a really, really good exercise in improvisational skills. From personal experience, I've had several game sessions planned that never happened due to the choices that the players made. So I had to invent as we went along, and it's really fun. But there are 2 types of campaigns a DM can run. They can either create it all by themselves, in what's referred to as a homebrewed campaign, or they can use a campaign book written by Wizards of the Coast, like this one, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. They're the company that currently makes D&D. Next, after finding a DM, you'll need to assemble the rest of the group. And assuming that you are one of these players, that means probably around 3 other people. I've found that 4 is a really good starting point for a really clean and easy to organize group. And you can assemble your group on various free websites or video call services like Skype, Discord, whatever. The one that I'm actually going to be linking in the description, it's what I would have in my PowerPoint if I had one, is a site called Roll20. And that basically gets rid of a lot of the tangible things that you would need otherwise. Like these. So now that you have your group, what do you need now? Ordinarily, you'd need to spend like 10 or so bucks on a set of polyhedral dice. But if you do it online, you don't have to do that. Ordinarily, you would need a set of 7 polyhedral dice. And the most commonly rolled one, the most important one, is the 20-sided one. And the dice essentially decide everything that happens within the game. It makes it to where you successfully hit something, or you successfully pick something up, or run away, or backflip, or whatever you want to do. They all have names, and they're very simple to understand. The name is the letter D, followed by the number of sides that they have. For example, the 20-sided one is the D20, the 12-sided one is the D12, the one everybody's familiar with is the D6, the 6-sided die, and so on. Each die has its specific uses. For example, if you wanted to, just say you wanted to hit someone with a sword, most swords are just D6s. Magic, everything revolves around the dice. You'll also need access to the various source books that D&D has. Each book gives you more options for character creation, but the most important one is the aptly named Player's Handbook. This gives you an excellent starting point on the various races and classes that you're able to do, but if you want to, there are also supplements to that, adding even more options for character creation. The Dungeon Master needs the Dungeon Master's Guide that I showed earlier, as well as the Monster Manual. And of course, everything that I'm saying is within the actual Player's Handbook itself. And there's even a website that further explains this. I used D&D Beyond to assemble this little brief run-through, but the last book you'll need if you're the DM is the actual campaign book. And what that is, it's just a pre-written book for people getting into D&D or just not feeling like thinking too hard about making your stuff. But of course, these are just guidelines, these books. You can just make your own riff on it. Lastly, and probably the most lengthy portion of this, is going to be character creation, because you have your group, you have your materials, and the last thing you'll need to get started is an actual character to build off of. Just go for that. Okay. This is going to be a little bit lengthy. But it's also the most expressive part of the game as a player. And step 1 is opening your Player's Handbook to page 17 and choosing the race and class that you want to play. Now, according to D&D Beyond, there are currently 13 playable classes and 41 different races to choose from. So in order to choose, we first have to ask ourselves, what do we want to do? And this is where we can exercise our creative muscles a little bit by including as much backstory or anything that you want on your character. Like, what do they like to do? What do they like to be around? What do they do? And races in D&D stem from anything from elves to humans to humanoid dragons to literal walking, talking robots. It's a weird game. But we can separate the actual classes listed on listed on page 45 of the Player's Handbook into one of 3 categories. The categories are referred to in the book as martial, half-casters, and full casters. The martial classes are just the simplest classes to build. They don't have any spell casting or any of that weird magic-y stuff. But even then, there's a lot of variety. You have the barbarian to just smash things and be angry. You have the fighter to just handle all sorts of weapons. You have the rogue if you want to be sneaky, or the monk if you want to punch things. They often tend to stay up close with the enemy, but there are plenty of options to be further in the back. Half-casters refer to the 3 classes that act as a bit of a hybrid between the up-close people and the people with magic. They're Ranger, Paladin, and Artificer. They can do anything both do, but they do have a few limitations to them, which is an entire other speech. The full casters are Druid, Cleric, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Bard. And Wizard, if I didn't mention it. They're a lot more complicated due to the vast array of spells available to people, and I can honestly do an entire speech about setting up your casters. So for the purpose of this speech, I'm just going to be building a simple martial character using my personal favorite class, the Rogue. But before we get into that, we need to first talk about stats. There are 6 main stats in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, according to Wizards of the Coast. They are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. They all have certain abilities to them, so they're all useful, but to break it down a little bit, Strength and Dexterity are the most important to your more physical attacks. Strength affects your ability to lift things up, as well as how hard you can hit. Dexterity makes you harder to hit and more accurate with your more dexterity-based weapons, like daggers or bows. Constitution affects how much hit points you have, or how many hits you can take before you are on the ground, as well as how resistant you are to things like poisons. The other 3 stats are more important for spellcasters, but everyone can use them. Intelligence affects memory and spellcasting for only artificers and wizards. Wisdom affects stuff like your medicinal knowledge, or the ability to handle animals or notice things off in the distance. It's also the spellcasting stat for, I think, rangers, clerics, and druids. Charisma is actually the most important of the 3, because it affects how well you're able to talk to people, as well as how easily you can convince someone to listen to you, or anything, really. It also affects the spells of paladins and every other spellcaster I haven't already listed. And I think that's Warlock, Sorcerer, Bard? The race that you choose affects the stats that you are able to, the stat boosts that you get. So keep that in mind if you care. A lot of people, myself included, I think of a story first and mold everything around that. And each stat has a maximum of 20, and increases the number that you get added to your other stuff by, every 2 numbers, for a maximum of +5 at 20, and a minimum of -5 at 0. Now, putting all of this complicated stuff together, I'm going to walk you through a character using the simple stat array found on I think, yeah, page 6 of the Player's Handbook. What that is, we're going to get a group, we're going to get 5 numbers to just put into any stat that we want. So, I have my Player's Handbook, and I've decided that I'm going to be choosing a human rogue. As default, humans get +1 to all other stats, so that makes everything a lot easier. So we have a 15, a 14, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8. And since we picked human, that makes it a 16, a 15, a 14, a 12, an 11, and a 9. Next, we decide where we want the stats to go. If you look under the Rogue section of the Player's Handbook on page 95, you see that the makers of the game recommend that dexterity be your highest ability score, followed by your charisma. Personally, I think rogues should have a little bit more flexibility. So, what we're going to do, our most important stat is dexterity, followed by constitution and wisdom. So right now, we've put the 16 under dexterity, the 15 under constitution, and the 14 under wisdom. After that, our intelligence, charisma, and strength is our lowest stat. We don't care about that much. This puts us at 16 dexterity, 15 constitution, 14 wisdom, 13 charisma, 11 intelligence, and 9 strength. And to start off with, you want to look under your class's tables in the book that you're using, to find what dice you start your HP with. Rogues get a D8 to start off with, so you add 8 plus your Constitution modifier, which in this case is +2, to get the starting HP 10. So there we have it. You have a human rogue, and you are able to start playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know what you need, so you can go and get started. I would love to answer any further questions from anyone interested in playing D&D, honestly. It's one of my favorite hobbies, and it's a lot of fun, but there is a bit of a learning curve to it, and I understand if that turns anybody off, because it's a lot to learn, but once you have it learned, it's a lot of fun, and it's really rewarding. And there you have it. Play D&D. It's fun.